My name is Jackson Wells. I'm 35 years old and I serve as a captain in the United States Army. For the past 8 months, I was stationed in Syria, leading a tactical logistics team near Deir ez-Zor running on dust, stress, and caffeine. Most days, I had little time to think about home. The Army has a way of stretching time. A week feels like a month. A phone call can make the world tilt, especially when it comes in the middle of a desert sunrise. That call came from my younger brother Cole. His voice cracked as he told me Grandpa had passed. No warning, just a heart attack in the kitchen. 1 minute he was cooking eggs. The next, he collapsed. The words hit harder than any mortar blast I'd ever heard. Grandpa raised us more than our parents ever did. He taught me how to tie a tie, how to drive stick, how to fix a leaky faucet with duct tape and a curse word. He even helped me fill out my West Point application when Mom said it was a waste of time. We weren't rich, but Grandpa made everything feel solid. Like the house would always stand. Like the family would hold. I dropped everything. Filed emergency leave. Caught the first military flight out. I had to be there for the funeral. I owed him that much. The plane ride home was a blur. I barely slept. Every bump in the air felt like the world cracking a little more. When I landed, I expected chaos. Mourners. Flowers. Quiet sobs in the hallway. Instead, the house was still. No black ribbons. No casserole trays. Just Cole fidgeting with a remote saying Mum was out back and didn't want to be disturbed. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Our family was never perfect, but we were close. At least, that's what I believed. Deep down, I always felt like I had to prove something. Mom favored Cole. She called him the charming one, the future CEO. I was the one who fixed the broken fence, who followed rules, who disappeared for long deployments and wrote postcards no one replied to. Still, I never questioned our bond. Until that day, that silence, that strange emptiness in my own home. Something was wrong, and I hadn't even begun to scratch the surface. I walked into the house expecting grief, or at least signs of it. A folded flag on the mantel, framed photos in black and white, a silence that carries weight. Instead, there was a breeze blowing through the open windows and the faint sound of Sinatra playing in the kitchen. It was all too normal. Cole sat on the couch, watching a baseball game. He barely looked up. No flowers. No funeral program. No casket. I felt like I'd stepped into the wrong reality. This wasn't what I flew halfway across the world to walk into. When I asked where the funeral was, Cole shrugged. Said Mom had cancelled everything. No explanation. Just told people it was a mix-up. I pressed him, but he changed the subject. Then he told me I should talk to Mom. That she'd explain better. She was out back watering the garden like it was any Tuesday afternoon. No tears. No sign her father had just died. I watched her from the kitchen window. She moved too casually, like nothing had happened. Still in uniform, boots dusty, I stepped outside. She looked up, smiled like I had just come home from school, not Syria. She gave me a long hug, said she missed me. I asked her what was going on. Where was the service? Why did no one tell me Grandpa wasn't really gone? Her face changed. Just a flicker. Then she laughed it off, said it was all a misunderstanding. Grandpa had fallen in the kitchen. Paramedics came, but he recovered. She claimed Cole must have panicked and overreacted when he called me. I stood there, my jaw tightening. That wasn't what Cole said. He told me Grandpa was gone. He cried. He said it with finality. Now Mom was rewriting the whole event like it was just a misdialed number. Something felt off. I asked to see Grandpa. She hesitated just a second, then said he was napping in the study. I didn't wait for permission. I walked in. He was sitting in his recliner, wearing a cardigan, flipping through a newspaper, like he always did. At first glance, he looked fine, but when he turned to me, his eyes didn't fully register. He called me by Dad's name, then laughed and said he needed to go fix the porch light, though it had been replaced years ago. He seemed confused, disconnected, like his mind was fading in and out. Mom hovered behind me, arms crossed, saying softly that he's been having spells, that he forgets things, mixes people up. She said stress might cause the whole heart scare. I nodded, but my gut twisted. I'd been trained to read people, and something about Grandpa's confusion didn't feel natural. It felt forced, like a script someone forgot to rehearse properly. I couldn't prove anything, but every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. I stayed by his side for a while. He kept talking, jumping from memory to memory, most of them unrelated. But occasionally he'd glance at me and something would flash behind his eyes. A flicker of clarity, like he recognized me. Then it would vanish. It left me more unsettled than if he hadn't recognized me at all. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing his voice in my head, repeating stories that didn't line up. I started reviewing the timeline. The call, the flight, the welcome home. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I hadn't come home to mourn a death. I had walked into a lie. One too polished. One too carefully staged. And I had no idea why. I started digging the day after I got home. Not literally, though, the metaphor fits. Years in the army had trained me to look past what people said and focus on what they did. And nothing about this situation added up. Grandpa was alive but barely present. Mom was calm, too calm. Cole was distant, like he wanted to disappear. So I did what I knew best. I pulled up records, traced emails, checked into Grandpa's bank accounts. He had always been private about his finances, but I knew enough to find the cracks. That's when I saw it. A wire transfer, no several, totaling close to $4.8 million. Moved out over 3 months. Sliced thin spread across shell companies, some even bearing names I vaguely recognized from Mom's charity work. On paper, it looked like Grandpa had donated the money, but the pattern felt strategic, almost militarized. Spread the funds, avoid detection, keep just enough in each account to stay under reporting thresholds. Someone had planned this. Someone who understood how to play the system. Still, that wasn't the part that made my stomach drop. What got me was realizing that this money wasn't the full picture. Grandpa's real estate, his controlling shares in the family company, and his voting rights on the trust fund board, those were still in limbo. Legally, they couldn't move unless he passed away. That was the key. The money was bait. The real prize was control. And for that, they needed a death certificate. It hit me like a gut punch. They didn't just lie about Grandpa dying. They engineered a full-scale financial takeover, masked as a family tragedy. The fake death wasn't just an emotional manipulation. It was a legal trigger. The trust fund had been set up decades ago with rigid conditions. Only upon Grandpa's official death would the assets transfer to the listed beneficiaries. If I had stayed overseas and signed whatever they put in front of me, it would have all looked clean. Legal. Untouchable. But I came back, and now I saw the whole battlefield. This wasn't a mistake or a miscommunication. It was a coordinated effort. My own mother, maybe even my brother, had conspired to erase Grandpa on paper, to seize the empire while pretending to mourn. And I was never supposed to question it. I was just the soldier, the good son, always away, always obedient. But they forgot one thing. Soldiers come home, and some of us come back asking questions. For days, I watched him closely. The way he shuffled, repeated himself, stared off like the world was slipping through his fingers. It looked convincing, almost too convincing. But there were moments, brief flickers, where something sharp flashed in his eyes. A glance that lingered a second too long. A pause before repeating a story, like he was checking if I noticed. I couldn't shake the feeling. The man who taught me chess, who once handled 3 businesses at once, didn't forget his own birthday, and then recite my military rank with perfect clarity 5 minutes later. Something was off. I tested him, left articles on the table, turned the volume on the TV to odd numbers, asked about relatives who didn't exist. Sometimes he'd bite. Other times he'd look straight through me as if playing a role and daring me to see through it. The tipping point came late one night. I walked into the study to grab my phone and found him standing by the window. He didn't flinch, didn't pretend. He just said my name. My real name. Jackson. Not my father's. Not my brother's. Just mine. He told me to close the door. Then, in the clearest voice I'd heard since coming home, he asked me how much I knew. His tone was cold, measured, deliberate. He wasn't confused. Not even close. He'd been faking it, letting them believe he was slipping, giving them room to get greedy. He'd seen the signs, the glances between my mother and Cole, the sudden urgency around documents and legal paperwork. Playing dumb was the only way he could stay close without giving them a reason to lock him out completely. I didn't say a word for a full minute. Just stood there, jaw clenched, trying to process the shift. The man I thought needed protection had been leading a quiet war behind closed doors. He didn't need rescuing. He needed a partner. We sat down and compared notes. Everything I had uncovered he already suspected. But he couldn't move without evidence, without someone he trusted. That's why he kept his mind sharp, but his words sloppy. Let them think they had the upper hand. That night changed everything. I stopped looking at Grandpa like a victim. He wasn't broken. He was patient, calculated. And now that I was in the loop, we became something they never expected. Not grieving relatives. Not pawns. We were two soldiers, strategists, ready to take back what they tried to steal, one move at a time. Once we were aligned, Grandpa and I moved in silence. We didn't need to say much. We had a mission. I built the trap with precision, just like I used to plan base security protocols overseas. We found an old safe in the basement, rusted but functional. I modified the lock so it clicked shut but wouldn't secure. Then we filled it with bait. A few stacks of staged bills. A fake deed. A fake will. A folder stamped with red tabs and legal-sounding nonsense. Just enough truth to make it look valuable. Just enough fiction to trigger greed. I left the safe in Grandpa's old work shed, a place Mom hadn't visited in years. Then I planted the seed. At breakfast the next morning, I casually mentioned the safe. Told her Grandpa kept mumbling about documents out back. That he said something about a revised will. She didn't react much, not immediately. But her spoon paused midair. Her eyes flicked toward the backyard window. That was all I needed. The cameras were already in place. Motion activated. Hidden in an old toolbox, a light fixture, and one disguised as a garden gnome. I'd tested each angle, each feed. If anyone went near that shed, I'd know. That afternoon, I left a note on the kitchen counter. Said I was heading into town for supplies. Invited them to help themselves to anything they needed. Left the back door unlocked on purpose. They didn't waste time. Less than 30 minutes after I left, Mom and Cole slipped out the back. No coats. No small talk. Straight for the shed. They didn't see the blinking light inside the toolbox. They didn't notice the whisper of a sensor picking up movement. I watched the footage that night. Watched them force the lock, dig through papers, whisper in low voices about transfer forms and who would keep what. Grandpa sat next to me on the couch. Silent. Just nodding as he sipped his tea. We had them. On tape. In the act. But it wasn't just theft we were capturing. It was intent. The lengths they'd go to. The lies they'd tell. They still thought Grandpa was lost in his mind. That I was just a soldier grieving and naive. What they didn't realize was the war had already started. And they had just walked straight into our first ambush. The gala was packed. Crystal chandeliers, champagne glasses, velvet gowns, and donors dressed like royalty. My mother stood center stage, her smile rehearsed, her voice silky, as she thanked everyone for their generosity. It was her favorite night of the year, a celebration of control, of image, of power. Cameras flashed. Music played. She looked untouchable, until the screen behind her flickered. The lights dimmed without warning. The music cut off. Then the footage rolled. Silent at first. A black and white grainy clip of the garden shed. The doors swinging open. My mother and Cole stepping inside, glancing over their shoulders, then tearing through the safe, whispering, stealing. The crowd gasped. Some stood. A few covered their mouths. She froze, her hand hovering in the air like a ghost had grabbed it. I stepped forward first. Calm. Measured. I took the mic. Told the room what they were watching. I laid it all out. The fake death. The false inheritance. The attempted takeover. Gasps turned to murmurs. Whispers turned to outrage. People who once praised her now stared like they didn't know her at all. Then Grandpa walked in. Full suit. Shoes shined. Back straight. Eyes clear. The crowd parted like water. He didn't say a word. Just handed a manila envelope to the estate attorney seated in the front row. Inside was everything. The footage. Witness statements. A signed declaration confirming his mental clarity. And the clause he had tucked away decades ago. If at any point a family member attempted to fraudulently claim inheritance while he was alive, they would be permanently removed from the trust. No debates. No loopholes. Just consequence. The attorney read the clause aloud. My mother's face drained of color. Cole tried to speak, but Grandpa raised a hand and he went quiet. The board members stood. Security moved in. The trust was officially transferred. Control stripped from her. Irrevocable. Legal. Public. People started clapping. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of justice ringing through a room built on ego. And in that moment, for the first time since I came home, I felt breath fill my lungs again. I looked at Grandpa. He nodded once, slow and sure. We didn't say a word. We didn't have to. She tried to bury the truth. We brought it back to life in front of everyone. It's been 6 months since the gala. The headlines faded fast like they always do. Scandal burns hot, then burns out. But for me, the silence that followed has been louder than the storm. I spent my life believing family meant everything. That blood was thicker than disappointment. That even through distance and duty, home was still a place you could trust. That illusion is gone now. What hurts the most isn't what they did. It's how easily they did it. My own mother looked me in the eye and lied. She hugged me knowing she'd tried to erase the man who raised me. I used to think if I served my country with enough honor, maybe I'd earn her pride. Turns out she only saw me as an obstacle, a uniform that wouldn't follow her script. And when I didn't, she tried to cut me out of the picture altogether. Cole was different. He followed her lead, but he wasn't built for deception. When it all crumbled, he came to me, broken, ashamed. He said he thought it was a plan to protect the family, not steal from it. Maybe that was true. Maybe he just didn't want to be left out. I don't know, but I forgave him. Not because he asked, because I needed to let go of the weight. We meet sometimes. Quiet talks. No big gestures. Just two brothers trying to learn how to be human again. Grandpa lives with me now. We bought a small ranch in Colorado. Not fancy, but peaceful. He spends mornings walking the property, afternoons sketching in an old notebook. Some days he's quiet. Other days he tells stories I've heard 100 times, but now I listen closer. Every word feels like it means more. like there's still something to salvage. Some version of family that doesn't hurt to hold on to. I don't speak to my mother. I don't plan to. There's nothing left to fix there. She made her choice, and I made mine. People always say time heals everything. I don't think that's true. Some wounds just become part of you. They change how you walk, how you trust, how you love. But they also show you what matters, who you are when no one's watching. I learned I'm not defined by betrayal. I'm not broken. I'm just awake now. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, I get it. If you've ever been lied to by someone you trusted most, I've been there. And if you've ever had to rebuild from the ground up brick by painful brick, know this. You're not alone. You're not weak. You're just finally building something real. A family built on lies will always collapse. Ours just happened in public,